tension rises as former President Thabo Mbeki has launched a blistering attack on President Cyril Ramaphosa, accusing his government of failing to tackle South Africa's biggest challenges. Mbeki argued that blaming immigrants for unemployment and crime is misleading and said the government is avoiding the real causes of the country's problems.
I let you go. I'm gonna give an opportunity to President Mbeki to ask a few questions. The earlier panelists, please also be ready to respond to some of the questions. President?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Kuno. There won't be many the questions, but unfortunately for us, Professor Madlingos here didn't give us time to ask you questions. So I'm grabbing that opportunity.
His sharp criticism has sparked fresh debate over the ANC's leadership and Ramaphosa's handling of the nation. Do you think Mbeki is right, or should Ramaphosa be defended? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more breaking South African news.
I let you go. I'm gonna give an opportunity to President Mbeki to ask a few questions. The earlier panelists, please also be ready to respond to some of the questions. President?
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Kuno. There won't be many the questions, but unfortunately for us, Professor Madlingos here didn't give us time to ask you questions. So I'm grabbing that opportunity now, but also the same questions to the same group, to the professors. Unfortunately, Professor Makoba seems to have left. These are really about the context within which this constitution is functioning. That's why I'm asking these questions. The President Ramaphosa in 2018 appointed the new Joint Commission of Inquiry into SARS. 3 questions about that. Why was that commission appointed? What did it find? What relevance is that, whatever it found? Of what relevance is it to South Africa yesterday, today, and tomorrow? There's 3 questions about the new Joint Commission. It's quite specific. When we came into government in 1994, the South African economy was going down. By 2007, 2008, the economy was going this way. In fact, just to give one example, for the first time since the Act of Union, that government achieved budget surpluses. That meant you had more money to invest in growing the economy, and So from 1994 to 2008, 2009, the South African economy is going this way, and other things also. During this period, something like 6 million new jobs are created during this time. Then from around 2009, 2010, the economy goes in the opposite direction. Just like that, it goes like this. And for the first 15 years, let us say, you have 6 million new jobs created. For the next 15 years, you got 1 million new jobs created. Now, I'm asking this question. What explains this radical change? It's very, very radical. It's more or less overnight. We're going like this, and suddenly, boom, up to today, we reach growth rates of 6% around 2007 and so on. And since 2009, 2010, they've hardly reached 1%. What changed? So these are my 4 questions. 3 about Nugent, 1 about this radical change. I'm asking the professors on both sides if they could explain, because it would be very important to understand that in order to understand everything we've said about the Constitution. If we don't understand that background, we won't understand the Constitution. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Just 4
Thank you.
questions.
Thank you. I'm going to ask the professors this side first to try engage with the question from the president, and then, yes. Yes.
Well, I will try to answer, but you posed the questions, President Mbeki, in such a way that it made me think that you have answers in mind, and you want to see whether we get to those answers. So it feels as though I'm almost a student and not a professor, and and you are posing a test. But let me try. So the first 3 questions, and perhaps I'll leave the last question, which is the most difficult one, to Professor Madlingozi. But the first question is, my impression was the Nugent Commission was established in order to investigate allegations that the receiver of revenue had been captured. That the receiver of revenue had been captured. Your second question was...
We can't hear, Chair.
You can't hear?
Yes.
Okay, is this better?
Absolutely.
Okay. So it was created in order to investigate allegations that the receiver of revenue had been captured. Your second question about the Nugent Commission was? What did he find?
What was their finding?
So in very general terms, the finding was, yes, it had been captured. It had been captured over quite a short period of time, in fact. And the third question? Why is it important? Well,
I'm saying our relevance as that answer.
Yeah.
Have to South Africa yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
To the situation we find ourselves in now and where we are going. Well, I think it explains a lot of that, because it is an example of the manner in which let's call it the attention of our society that manifests in how we spend and allocate and apply the resources at our disposal. The attention of our society shifted from the public and the public interest and what is good for all of us to something more parochial, let me simply call it that, and something more personal. And that has meant that there have been many years in which I suppose we lost direction as a result. Those would be my answers. I don't know whether you wish to add.
You don't have to answer if you don't have the answers. It's fine. It's perfectly okay. Prof. Makova, you are back. Did you hear the questions?
Me a little bit. I was out. What was the first question? No. Okay.
Let's leave it. Let's ask those ones.
I want to answer.
You what? I'll come back to you then. Let's try that.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to give a short answer to this, because it's an issue that President Mbeki has...
You are not a professor. Please don't, just leave it. I'll come back to you last.
Sorry?
I'll come to you last. And Anthony also, don't answer. I'll come to you last. I know what you people think, because I work with you every day. You don't have to answer if you don't have the answer.
Yeah, no, they'll come back to you, Professor. Yes, Professor. Can I try to answer this question? Not me. Okay. What is the implication of the finding on the Constitution today, tomorrow, and in the future?
President, I think you directed this question to professors. Uh, we are on the way there, we are not there yet. So I would humbly leave it to the professor to respond to it.
Let me try. So, of course, the first answer that is given is that the difference is the global economic recession of 2008, 2009. But that can't be true because South Africa was almost insulated from that because of our regulatory system. So we should discard that answer. But that answer is given all the time, that all over the world there was a global recession and all of us suffered. So the second possibility, of course, is that from 2000 and even under your tenure, President Mbeki, we see a lot of capital flight. There is a lot of structural adjustment happening after a year and so forth, but we don't see enough investment by the companies. Companies are holding on to their investment. That continues today. But then the third reason, of course, is leadership. And leadership not only because of so-called state capture. Leadership also because the work that was done to professionalize the civil service stopped midway somewhere. And therefore you have three phenomena. One, a lot of turnover. Two, a lot of instability in a lot of institutions. But for me, we had Gear, we had Asgiza, there was some vision of what kind of economy. We can debate whether it was successful or not, but you don't see that framework. The only framework that we see is the National Development Plan. Ambitious goals, very clear goals, very good goals. The question then is, why are we not meeting those goals? That disjuncture between good policies and implementation. So I want to say that it is about leadership, it is about vision, but it's also the fact that, we are not able to force, quote unquote, our companies to invest. We're not able to, you always, President, speak about capital flight and not capital flight, but financial flows, illicit financial flows. Not as much in South Africa as other parts of Africa, but we also have that. So a lot of explanation, but leadership and no vision, I would say those are the key. Thank you.
You want me to ask questions again? Or you have the questions? Go ahead then.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm going to talk about, firstly, the issue of unemployment. There's been a consistent unemployment in South Africa. I think if you check the statistics, it's sort of been consistent. And even under your leadership, the number was still also high as well, if you check the numbers. And the other issue is that I think in 2009, although Prof. Matlingos is trying to dismiss the issue of global recession as one of the key factors of the spiral down that happened, I think there's some evidence that supports that idea that South Africa doesn't operate in isolation. It's also part of the global community, and whatever happens in the global markets also affects South Africa as well. And secondly, there was also a significant destruction of public institutions, particularly SARS, that particularly affected the structure of the budget. Obviously, if SARS as an important institution in South Africa is functioning clearly and you're able to collect your tax, that would mean that you are able to support service delivery, you deliver quality services and so on. But I think after your office that there's been like the significant destruction, particularly of SARS, the so-called capture that happened at SARS definitely had an impact on the South African economy. Secondly, the other issue is that the South African economic trajectory has always been fragile. The markets also want to arm up to a certain individual. If the media, in particular, has a problem with a particular leader, there would be a campaign against the individual, and that, to an extent, will affect how the markets react to the appointment of a person. And I think that has to do with the reading of the political mood in a country, that if you are appointing a certain political leader who is associated with this particular reputation in that society, the markets, who are maybe a group of capitalists, will have skepticism towards the person, and they would want to take their investment out of that particular country because they might not be sure what's going to happen in the future if that person becomes president. And I think potentially that happens. And the other issue is that the fragility of neoliberalism in its sense that if the state is functioning but cannot function without the involvement of private capital, any small change will cause some anxiety and eventually affect how the economy is moving as a whole.
Thank you. Sorry. My attempt is that what the question shows, because your question frames a time of prosperity and then a time of decline. So what I'm reading from the question is that even in context of conflict, in context where the media doesn't like you, in context where there are challenges, what determines success is when you know who you are, self-identity is very clear, when there's leadership, and when there's accountability and integrity. If you combine all those, you will be able to do well even when there's difficulty, because there's always difficulty. There's always someone who wants to take from you. There's always someone who wants to direct where you must go. And they will do so if you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you stand for, but most importantly, in terms of the state, if you don't know what your priorities are. So what I'm seeing from that time of success is not that there were no difficulties, but that there was direction, and the direction came from being grounded in something much bigger than wanting to eat and fill your pockets.
Thanks, Professor Kuno. Professor Brandt is correct. I have a view about these questions I was posing them deliberately. It's because we have a crisis in the country, which means we've got to try and study this thing and understand it objectively, as precisely as possible. What's wrong? What's gone wrong? Because if we can't get that answer right, we can't get the diagnosis right, we won't get the answer right. So I'm saying you are quite correct, Professor Brandt, to say that during the 1940s, an organization formed, in fact, it was formed in 1939, the Ossewa Brandwacht. The Ossewa Brandwacht, what is distinctive about it is that it was a neo-Nazi organization. Its symbols were copied directly from the German Nazis, everything. That's a neo-Nazi organization. The Nazis, the German Nazis, like the South African Nazis, they had a very strong policy position. And that policy position was that their strategic enemy is the communists. So even if you have an election and you defeat them in elections, that's not enough. You must destroy them. They must cease to exist. The Osama Brandbach adopted that position from the Nazis in Germany. It was the communists, which you saw the way that the Second World War was fought. 3/4 of the German army was on the Eastern Front for the Soviet Union, because that was their principal strategic enemy. And anybody else associated with the communists must also be killed. If you look at German history, it will tell you that story. The Osama Brandbach here takes that same position. You remember they opposed the Smuts government and supported the Germans and all that. But in the end, the Osama Brandbach got absorbed into the National Party. John Foster, Osama Brandbach. Peter Porter, Osama Brandbach. Nico Dietrichs, Osama Brandbach. C.R. Swart, Osama Brandbach. They come into the National Party with that understanding. That is why you have the Suppression of Communism Act in 1950. It was an expression of a firm ideological position. This thing must be killed. Plus, the ones associated with it must be killed. So, the ANC is a strategic enemy of the National Party already in 1950. But they start with the Communist Party. Comes 1994, change takes place. This same group, which originally originated from the Osama Brandbach, said, the ANC has been our strategic enemy and we've tried to destroy it. It's now won the elections, but it has not changed. It remains our enemy. So our offensive against the ANC doesn't stop because they are government. What then happened was a counter-revolutionary group was formed formally from the old National Party, particularly from Defense Intelligence. And their task was to make sure that they defeat the ANC. That is why I was asking these questions. You see what, you remember the SARS. SARS at the beginning was outperforming itself. They would say, we're going to collect $1 billion, and when they announced, it's $1.5 billion. No. And suddenly it changed around 2014 and went the opposite direction. That's why SARS, that Judicial Commission was appointed. Because how do you explain this? This SARS, which performs so well, and all of a sudden it performs in the opposite direction. That's why the Nugent Commission was appointed. What is wrong? What has gone wrong? That report is on the internet, you can read it. And what Nugent says, this was a deliberate attempt to kill the organization. I don't know what capture meant. A deliberate attempt to kill the organization, which is responsible for 95% of state revenues. You kill SARS, you kill the democracy. They didn't steal a single cent. During this 2014, 2015, 2016, those years, they didn't steal 1 cent. They were killing the organization. And Nugent has done Gressad a favor, because he's put in detail what practically they did. On day one, they did this. On day two, they did this to kill the organization so that this government does not have the revenues to function. We were together with Judge Nugent the other day, and these lawyers were saying, President, what we were trying to say in that report, that was treason. And it was. It was treason because they were continuing this fight to destroy and defeat this ANC. That's why I was asking, what conclusion did Nugent reach? What the conclusion was, there is a group of people in South Africa who are very determined that this democracy must fail. And one of the things we must do, what can we do? Turn off the money, the tax tap. They can't pay salaries, they can't pay the police, they can't do anything. The state is broke, it collapsed. I'm saying that conclusion by Judge Nugent is relevant to South Africa in 1994, South Africa yesterday, South Africa tomorrow. Because that group hasn't changed its mind. This thing must fail. That is what explains this thing I was talking about. You have South Africa growing like this and that nicely, and suddenly it goes the other way around. Professor Makoba, you should look at this thing, study it. There are articles that have been published with documentation. The 2008 financial crisis, as Professor Madlingos is saying, had very slight impact here. Because of what had happened, I was mentioning, for instance, that for the first time since 2010, we had budget surpluses. The fact that you have budget surpluses is when the economy grows down, it cushions you because you got some cash. The articles have been written, analytical articles about that, not guesswork, not me talking. In fact, it's Afrikaner professors. Yeah. So the 2008 financial crisis impacted on us, but not to the extent that for 15 years we stayed down at the bottom. All the peer countries of South Africa were impacted upon negatively by the 2008 crisis. By 2010, they recovered. Why didn't South Africa? Up to today. Yeah, let me just, 2022, 2002, the ANC had its elective conference, which we held at Stellenbosch University. That same group had decided that it must take over the leadership of the ANC at that conference, because it was saying to itself, it can't succeed to do the destructive work it wants to do if the ANC leadership doesn't change. They then decided they were not quite ready. 2002. They acted in 2007. That's why you have this crisis about the ANC conference 2007. It's a deliberate intervention. So what has happened now in South Africa? I come from the ANC. I've been in the ANC for many years. You are not certain who is really ANC. You listen to people talking, you see them acting, and you're saying, this is not ANC acting. Something wrong with this one. Because what the apartheid intelligence did, which was very, very intelligent from their part, they infiltrated South African society. Not only ANC, PAC, Communist Party, whatever, the academia, business, media, the levels of infiltration of South African society by the apartheid intelligence service was very heavy. That's exactly Professor Brandt. It was a deliberate intervention by forces were originally Oseva Brandbach. And they had a strategic task to make sure that this democratic revolution fails. And they are busy at it to this day. And I'm saying, even look at the ANC. I can say for a fact that I know. They infiltrated the ANC very heavily. There are many of them we never found. And they are today sitting in senior positions. That's a crisis the country is facing. We've got to, all of these things about change, society is not changing radically, and unemployment isn't, of course it's increasing, it's deliberate. And we're not going to change that until we understand what is the nature of the problem. Even this constitution, whatever it is that we say about that constitution, it might be as beautiful as anything. But the social, socio-economic context in which it operates, it's deliberately intended to make sure that that constitution fails. It's a conscious, deliberate, organized process. We've got to try and understand, Professor Brandt, you're a professor, I'm not. You've got all the time to study these things in the greatest detail. I'm saying some of your professors have written articles. There's a professor at Stellenbosch, who's at the business school. Not Sambi, not Sambi. Written a very long article posing this question. He says, if you look at productivity rates in the South African economy, that's what that article says. It says we were doing very well until 2010. And then the productivity rate went the opposite direction. And he tries to answer that question. He says, why? What happened? And he's got a very interesting answer. It's in the article. I wish I could remember the name. He says there was a change of presidents. It's in the Bureau of Economic Research. It's the Bureau of Economic Research of Australia. You'll find it there. It is asking this question I was asking. Why this economy goes like this and all of a sudden it goes the other way around? And just studied this question. What was the impact of the 2008 financial crisis on South Africa? And he says it was there, but not to the extent that it got us into the position in which we are. There are other academics who studied these things who are writing about them. Franz Cronje, Dr. Franz Cronje, he speaks very clearly about this thing. And one of his complaints is, he says he does not understand the ANC. He says the things that happened between 1994, 2007, 2008 were absolutely remarkable. No other developing countries had achieved that. But he says the ANC is not claiming any of that. Why? I think I know why. But he doesn't answer the question. He poses a question, doesn't answer it. That is what I wanted to, that's why I was asking the question. If we don't understand this context of South Africa, what is the problem we're dealing with? It's not greedy people, inefficient, lazy. It's an organized, systematic process to make sure the democratic change doesn't happen. If we don't understand that, we won't find a solution. Sorry, Professor Kuno, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Thank you.